Most of the topics we're going to look at in the second half of the course deal with how likely or unlikely certain things are to occur. So that's what we're going to look at now, is the study of how likely something is to occur. We call it probability, and we're going to look at some fairly classical probability, which it would be reasonable to interpret as not real world math class kind of probability. And we'll move from that into the more useful stuff a little later. We're going to be looking at situations involving coins, dice, cards, and some simple tables, just because I want you to get the idea of the probability without having to worry about any more complicated context than something like flipping a coin or rolling a die. I think everybody gets those things. We're also going to need to understand some vocabulary here. There's some words that I'm going to be using throughout this part of the course, and I'm not going to stop to redefine them every time we talk about them. So make sure you've got these words. First of all, probability is how likely something is to happen in the long term. When we talk about flipping a die, or talk about flipping a coin, whether it comes up heads or tails, we know the probability of coming up heads is 1 in 2. That doesn't mean if we flip the coin twice, one is going to be heads, the other one's going to be tails. What that means is that over time, in the long run, about 1/2 of the time we should get heads and about 1/2 of the time tails. Okay, so probability is about long-term trends, not about exactly what's going to happen if you do 2 trials of something. An event is pretty much anything we do, like flip a coin, draw a card, roll a die, pick a person at random from a population, pick a tree at random from a forest. All of those things are events. Each event has an outcome. An outcome is the thing that happens. The event is we flip the coin. The outcome is we get heads. If the event is that we roll a die, the outcome is that we roll a 3. If we pick a person at random, the outcome might be that they're male, might be that they're female, might be that they're employed, might be that they drive more than 7 miles to work. Could be anything, depends on what we're studying. Okay, so the event is the thing that happens or the thing that we do. The outcome is the result of that. And if we look at all of the outcomes together, that's what we call a sample space. So if we're talking about rolling a die, the sample space is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. If we're talking about flipping a coin, sample space is head or tail. If we're studying the instances of, say, a birth defect in a population, the event might be a baby being born, and the outcome would be that they either have the disease or the genetic defect or they do not. And that would be the sample space. They either do or they don't. The outcome is either they do or they don't. Right? The sample space is all of the outcomes together. And lastly, not quite lastly, but successes versus failures. Much like we've talked about previously in this course when we talk about something being normal or expected or whatever we talk about, we aren't attaching any judgment to that. When we say success, that just means the thing that we're looking at, the thing that we're counting. So in the case of a genetic defect, you certainly would not consider having a genetic defect to be a success. But if we're looking at the probability of that defect occurring, then in probability, we call that thing the success. And a little bit of notation here. So this is our notation for probability of whatever happened. Talk about flipping a coin because it's easy. One outcome would be a head. So the probability of heads would be, you already know this, 1 in 2 because there are 2 possible outcomes and one of them is the success. Whatever's in here is the success, and this notation means the probability of this occurring. Okay, so that's not all the notation we're going to need for this part, but pretty much that's going to be it. There's not all that much notation here. Probability of something being 0 means that it's not going to happen. So if I flip a coin and the probability of flipping a heart, there's no heart on the coin, so that's impossible. The probability is going to be 0. If the probability of something is 0, that's impossible. If the probability of something is 1, that means it's a certainty. So if I flip the coin, what's the probability that it lands? Well, if I flip it, of course, it's going to come back down. It's going to land, so the probability is 1. That's certainty. Probability is 1, we know it's going to happen. Probability is 0, we know it's not. All of the probabilities will be between 1 and 0. There's no negative probabilities, and there's no probability greater than 1. Right, next time we'll look at some specifics.